Imagine yourself back in the 60s, living the daily routine of a teenager, studying and partying, coming home and finding these in the fridge. Number 1. TV dinners. What should you do with 260 extra tons of leftover turkey? Freeze it and put it in tiny aluminum trays. According to Smithsonian Magazine, when the Swanson Company had some extra turkey left after Thanksgiving in 1953, they came up with the idea of packaging it as part of a reheat meal. Paired with the country's newfound fascination with TV, such meals called TV dinners quickly became a hit for busy families, and siblings from everywhere were always arguing over who would end up getting the Salisbury steak. Number 2. Canned Chinese food. We must all be grateful that we live in the canned lo mein free age. Obviously, canned Chinese food was the main way people enjoyed this cuisine. One could find everything in a can, from chow mein to orange chicken to spicy beef. But nowadays, this unappetizing product is practically non-existent. Number 3. Ladies' dinners. This one has often been featured on diner menus across the United States, and it still sounds quite terrible to be honest. Basically, it's a dish made with a grilled hamburger patty, a small bowl of cheese with some canned fruits, and a dull salad. I guess this depressing and strange kind of dish has something to do with many of the strange diets of the time. Number 4. Party mix. Who could have thought that mixing together a bunch of cereals, nuts, and seasonings could create such a tasty treat? The first recipe for this type of party mix was printed on Chex boxes back in 1952, and according to legend, the recipe became popular during the holidays after the wife of a cereal company executive served the mix to guests at a party. Regardless of its backstory, kids from the 50s and 60s grew up making and consuming whole batches of the stuff. Fortunately, it's one of those retro products which hasn't been forgotten, as new versions emerge every year. Number 5. Baked Alaska. This meringue and ice cream cake originates from the creations of the chef at New York's Delmonico's restaurant in the 1860s. He probably borrowed the recipe from the French, but changed the name to honor the United States' recent purchase of Alaska. Meringues were set on fire on the table or in the oven. In the era of sophisticated home entertainment, the dessert offered housewives an option to demonstrate a truly impressive end to a dinner party. After experimenting with the original recipe, the whole process was narrowed down to the basics so that anyone could make it at home. An easy go-to dish for cases when a home cook needs to prepare a gourmet treat. The recipe of Baked Alaska is now included in Delmonico's chef's own cookbook, and we have to thank her for reviving this decadent ice cream delight. Number 6. Grasshopper Cocktail. One of the strangest 1960s drinks to make a comeback is served with a cocktail shaker. By blending equal parts of creme de menthe, creme de cacao, and whipped cream, you get a pastel green colored cocktail known as the Grasshopper. Although afternoon drinks have started to disappear along with nightclubs, Grasshoppers have made a comeback on the bar scene thanks to their 100th anniversary. Experienced bargoers have come to appreciate the vintage coolness and style of the sweet drink, as well as its obscurity. Number 7. Meatloaf. Meatloaf can seriously divide a crowd. The recipe for the original meatloaf first appeared in the Mediterranean region in the Middle Ages, serving as a method of utilizing meat waste through putting leftover meat together with nuts, fruit, and spices. The recipe caught on. Bread and eggs were added, and people traditionally ate it for breakfast. As the 1950s rolled around, everyone was already enjoying the iconic Betty Crocker loaf, and in the 1970s, new variations of the recipe surfaced as well, including ingredients like peaches and mashed bananas. No one would have ever thought of bringing a homemade product like this to a fancy restaurant. Thus, for many, meatloaf has grown to be a nostalgic memory, according to Bon Appetit. Number 8. Cocktail meatballs with grape jelly. This appetizer, which took the 60s by storm, combines seemingly unlikely ingredients: beef meatballs in grape jelly and tomato-based barbecue or chili sauce. Simmer it up all together, and you get a decade-defining starter. While it was possible to make the snack on the stove, the arrival of slow food processors revolutionized the idea of convenient American cooking, with people choosing to start making more of their favorite dishes using the new technology. As the 60s came to an end, cookbooks would occasionally find ways to introduce new recipes for cocktail meatballs with grape jelly to the public, in which case, it never disappeared completely. Even though you could always give this retro classic a try, the meatballs found a new life in the next generation of home cooks due to the return of slow food processors in the 1970s. Number 9. Liver and onions. Liver and onions has easily established itself as a beloved 1960s dish enjoyed even by teenagers who asked their mothers to have it made. This traditional home-cooked dish has its roots in Europe, where customers chose lamb liver, while the American standard requires pork or beef liver. On top of that, liver and onions has never gone out of style in Latin America, but as times changed, diners across the US have started to abandon it. Despite being one of the most overlooked salads, its return to popularity makes sense. Before the industrialized meat industry was determining which cuts of beef hit your dinner table, local products ensured home cooks had the opportunity to get the best cuts of meat, including liver. Number 10. Fondue. Fondue has been known to be one of those dishes that surely creates a sense of celebration every time it gets served. Dipping meat, bread, and vegetables into hot oil or cheese makes any mealtime much more fun. But dipping your favorite desserts into a stream of melted chocolate is a decadent delicacy which captured everyone's imagination in the 1960s. Unfortunately, despite this culinary trend captivating restaurant-goers, the style of dining and cooking at your own table eventually faded out of fashion, and was even felt to be sort of pretentious from those who tried to bring it back. Nevertheless, fondue has managed to endure the test of time thanks to the hype generated by shows like Mad Men, which showcased the dish, and restaurant visitors who weren't born in the era of fondue boom have discovered reasons to give this classic favorite a new life. Number 11. Ambrosia salad. Back when ambrosia salad first surfaced in the 19th century, there were very few things that epitomized culinary luxury as much as ambrosia salad. However, thanks to the popularity of marshmallows, the mixture of orange slices, pineapple chunks, maraschino cherries, and coconut flakes eventually became associated with special events such as church feasts. Well, our grandparents may have loved these vintage treats, but people born in the 50s and later may not have felt the same way about ambrosia or ragweed. For many baby boomers, this delicacy, which stayed widely popular until the 60s, had rather sickening associations with food that had to be forced down their throats, leaving many to avoid making it as soon as they finally came of age. Yet recently, ambrosia has been on the rise owing to a new wave of curious home cooks who want to rediscover its sweet flavor. Number 12. Spam. Tell someone that they should eat spam for dinner, and you may see a reaction you've never seen before. This mysterious 6-ingredient square-shaped meat first entered the mainstream market in 1937, but it actually made a splash in the 1960s when American soldiers who were forced to eat meat during World War II and utterly despised it suddenly began to eat spam since chefs started to use it as an ingredient in sandwiches and scrambled eggs. Number 13. Cherry's Jubilee. At some point, you couldn't go to any restaurant without seeing Cherry's Jubilee on the dessert menu. According to the Houston Press, this iconic flame dessert saw its golden years in the 60s, though as soon as American diners got tired of watching their food burst into flames in front of them, the interest in this retro dish slowly started to decline. The simple recipe was stuck in time and re-emerged thanks to home cooks' interest in theatrics. Number 14. Lipton Onion Soup Dip. No game day celebration or big party would be complete without chips and French onion dip. Lipton onion soup was mixed with a dairy product in order to create the mentioned side dish, which gained widespread popularity in the 1960s. It only received a massive upswing when America was overcome by Mad Men fever. The love for retro food and style sparked the product's resurgence and largely contributed to a significant increase in its sales. Number 15. Steak Diane. If you were a steak lover, the 1960s would have been the perfect decade for your taste. Steak Diane, one of the most recognizable retro dishes that once signified luxury life, first appeared in the 60s and inspired images of fancy black tie dinners and visits to steakhouses. The steak was served in a hot copper pan full of melted butter, with the waiter setting fire to the dish in front of the diners with a torch and sprinkling cognac over it. The accompanying wine sauce boasted an incredibly rich flavor and exuded decadence, creating an unforgettable taste. Although this classic of the 60s used to be available in any reputable steakhouse, times have certainly changed, and Steak Diane has dropped out of popularity. Believe it or not, but this is far from being the whole list of dishes, so let us know in the comments down below what your favorite dish from the 60s we forgot to include and what memories you have of it.